with the Prince Claus Fund Library, Amsterdam, in 2010. She is editing a sister volume, Hazar Bazaar, to be published by OUP in collaboration with the Endowment Fund Trust, forthcoming in 2023. She is the director of Numaish Karachi and the founding core team member, an award-winning interdisciplinary collective which opens public spaces of the city for cultural production. Zaidi has been teaching design at several institutions, including the Department of Visual Studies, University of Karachi. Currently, she serves as an additional curator at the Mohata Palace Museum, Karachi. She received her undergraduate degree from the National College of Arts, Lahore, and her master's from the Pratt Institute in New York. Please, would you like to come on stage? Thank you.
Salam, greetings. Thanks very much for that, Amal. So Alexander and Sindh from the lens of material history. We are super glad to see you, by the way. It's our last session. It's always wonderful to, and I'm sure that people will be trickling in. Great. So we've got 4 presentations today, and by 5 speakers, and you may have a read, please. I will be requesting Michel Boron to come on stage for the first presentation. He is, of course, a historian and anthropologist, and he has been working in Pakistan, actually, for since 1997, actually. So it's been quite a while, and prolific writer, lots of research, and very much focusing on the Sehwan. I also am very fortunate to know you for a decade and a half. Thanks to the fact that you were generous enough to contribute to my book. So, Michelle.
And my PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay. Good morning. And thank you very much for first inviting me in this very incredible conference on Alexander and the Indus Valley. And first I want to warmly thank EFT and especially Mr. Hamid Akhund for the support he gave us from a number of years now. And also, I would say that the collaboration between Hamid Akhund and friends started many years back. I don't know exactly, maybe 1989, because I already was in touch with Professor Monique Kervran, the French archaeologist, who started the excavation on the Killa Alexander's fort, but unfortunately she was not able to join us. Yes, also I want to thank some friends who asked me, who gave me this challenge. I need to relight the different components you can see in the title. Of course, Sewan Sharif and the material culture of Sufism, it is not an impossible task, but the figure of Sikandar, as you will see, it is another issue because as you know, I am a specialist on 19th, 20th century. I was a historian and also in anthropology. And of course, it's always interesting to have new issue and to address, and especially this presentation asked me to think about the figure of Sikandar in Sufism, but I would say not especially in relation with Sewan Sharif. So, Yes, Sewan Sharif in Sindh. Also most of my data was collected during a research project we have with the French interdisciplinary group in Sindhi studies. From 2008 to 2013, we used to come every year to Sewan Sharif, and also we had a geographer, topographer, architect, anthropologist, sociologist, historian, French, but also German, also Pakistani, for example, Dr. Hassan Ali Khan joined us also, and so it was a very interesting experience. So on these photos, you can see Sewan Sharif toward the south, and also you can see a number of domes, because domes are very important in relation with Sufism, because when you see a dome, there is a shrine where a Sufi is supposed to be buried. And at the center of the photo, you see the golden dome. This photo is pretty old now, because since then, the Mazar of Lal Shahbaz Qalandar has been reconstructed. But when you come from the south, from Jamshoro, Hyderabad, you can see the dome of the Mazar from very far. So it was for the people who wanted to come and pay respect to Lal Shahbaz Qalandar, that it can be seen from far. And also you can see other domes about the other shrine where Lal Shahbaz followers are buried. Yeah, I used to call Sewan a literal city, because I would say that Sewan, the space, the organization of the space, is structured by a number of ritual performances, but also in relation with the material culture by the shrine, as I said. And as you can see on the map, it was drawn by a member of our team, a topographer. From the map, you can see that the shrine of Lal Shahbaz, the Mazar, is the core of the city. And then you can draw circles, kind of circles around a first circle. And what is important to know is that the physical distance from the Mazar is a kind of metaphor of the spiritual distance of the saints who are buried in the other shrines with Lal Shahbaz Qalandar. What I want to say is that in the first circle around the Mazar, you find the closer followers, according to local tradition, of Lal Shahbaz. And in the other circles, so there were more distance. But also, there was a place devoted to Julelal, Udelolal, or Varun Dev. And once again, in the Hindu cosmology, the East is devoted to Shiva, so the temple of Shiva was in the east of the city, and the west is devoted to Varun, Varudev, where there was also a temple. So it is interesting to see this, I would say, Hindu infrastructure in Sewan. Yeah, so the center of the devotion is a Mazar, and once again, it is the old one. It is not the present one, because many changes occurs. For example, on the wall of the shrine, there were abstracts of Sufi poetry in Persian attributed to Lal Shahbaz, and now they have been removed, but it is another issue. So from this Mazar, we can see the Mazar of Lal Shahbaz Qalandar is the source of the Baraka from which all the other shrines are irradiated, and all the disciples of Lal Shabazz so are also taking benefit of this barakah. And this mazar is very, of course, important and interesting, and also the history of this mazar, because Ayaz said this was reconstructed many times with very important changing regarding a number of rituals. Just a few words about the personality of Lal Shabazz Qalandar. Also, I would say that Sevan Sharif is saturated with narratives, with different kinds of narratives regarding Lal Shabazz himself, and I don't know, it's very difficult, of course, to know about the origin of this narrative, but for example, according to this iconography, you can see two very different aspects of Lal Shabazz, because, for example, you have the very, I would say, here, this representation is old, and it is not the most common representation, and also is like performing a prayer on the prayer rug. So it is, I would say, a classical representation of Lal Shabazz. And there is other one, this association, when you can see him still performing a prayer, and of course with the Holy Quran on his knees. But you can see the other side of Lal Shabazz, this one dancing, performing the famous Damal. And so this aspect, I would say, is unorthodox. Of course, we can discuss of these categories, but it is related to the affiliation of Lal Shabazz Qalandar with this Sufi brotherhood known as the Qalandar, the Qalandaria, because according to the local tradition, he was initiated in this Sufi brotherhood by the founder, Jamaluddin Savi, or by another character from this silsila. But what is very interesting to see and to know is that the Qalandaria were Beshar Sufi. It means that they didn't put the Sharia as the first Muslim principle to be followed. They were even sometimes doing the opposite, or towards of the injection of the Sharia, and it comes from a kind of a principle. They were looking for blame, malam, and in the Sufi poetry of Lal Shabazz you can find this, that is doing malam. Malam, it is to be blamed because the main goal of this Sufi was to be closer to God, and for them the main obstacle to reach this station was the ego, E-G-O. And to fight the ego, you have to be blamed by the people, by the society. It was the only way, the best way to tame your ego, and so to be close to God. So these Qalandars, they used to live with the dead in the graveyard, without a roof on her head. They used to be dressed like women, always the opposite of the social norms of this time. So Lal Shabazz Qalandar belonged to this order, and also these Sufi were wandering Sufi, and even according to local tradition, Lal Shabazz reached Sevan only the last year of his life, or maybe 1 year and a half before he passed away. So it is indeed a very interesting character, also regarding to this affiliation with the Qalandaria. When we were doing this fieldwork in Sevan, very soon I observed that there were some issues related to material culture, which play a very important in the main mazar of Lal Shabazz, and everybody can see this relic. So once again, this relic is saturated with narratives, and so it will ask several lives to collect all the different narratives, and also because it is an ongoing process always to build new narratives. But I would say that, because, you know, we don't have old written sources for Lal Shabazz calendar. They are very recent, and especially after the Awqaf took the control of the Mazar, they did publication. So according to the main tradition, this stone would have been the stone given by the Umayyad general in Karbala, given to Hussein when after given to Zainul Abidin after the Battle of Karbala, when Zainul Abidin was asked to walk throughout the desert from Karbala, and so it was a very heavy stone, so that Zainul Abidin, who is the third Imam, Shia Imam, was compelled to bow. He could not walk. So according to the local tradition, this stone is the stone that was given to Zainul Abidin, and it would have been given to Lal Shabazz when he was wandering in Iraq, in Karbala. Even for these, there are different narratives. So it is this main story, I would say, which is dominating the narrative field. And so, of course, miraculous power are given to this stone because there are some water pouring from it, and of course it is said to be curative, etc. No, what am I doing? So the second relic, very interesting, and this one is not static, and this one is not really exhibited, but as you can see, there are two different relics with the same name, Gajga. As you know, I'm not at all a native Sindhi speaker, but according to when I question my friend, it's difficult to know the origin of this name, so maybe some people will give me information about. There was some hypothesis, but it is not a very common name. This Gajga is very close here to the Alam, as you can see, but what is very interesting, it is that there are two Gajga. The one on the right side is exhibited near the tomb of Lal Shabazz, and especially near the Gulu Band. So everybody can see it. But there is the other one on the left, which is kept now by the Awqaf, and it is a main ritual object which is used by the different protagonists of Sewan Sharif in relation with the worship of Lal Shabazz calendar. So there are days when this lineage of Sayyid from Sewan, they can take it and they can organize a procession throughout the city. Then another day it is the other lineage of Sayyid which is allowed to take it, this and that. Because the Sewan system, as I call it, in fact, is dominated by two families of Sayyid. One, it is the Lakhari Sayyid, and the other one is the Sabzvari Sayyid. But I would say there is some competition between us. So this object, this relic, is very important to see a kind of compromise between these different lineages. And so it is regarding the Gajga, especially under the control on the Awqaf after Lal Shabazz Mazar was nationalized under Ayub Khan in 1960. This is the third relic known as the Gaudry. Alors, no, it's French. Then I know that Gaudry today, in Sindhi especially, but I can be, of course, wrong, is a bag. But in Sufi poetry, because this word you can find it in a number of Sufi poetry in Sindhi, Gaudry was a kind of blanket. Especially, it was a symbol of the wandering fakir, but also of the wandering nat, Jogi. They used to travel with this Gaudry, and as I said, you can find it quoted in Sindhi Sufi poetry, because with this blanket, of course, they can sleep on this blanket. When it was cold, they can take it as such. So there is Lal Shabazz Gaudry, and this is a very symbol of wandering Sufism, I would say, of the calendar, of the calendaria. But what is very interesting, it is that it is exhibited only by one Sayyid family on the 10th of Muharram. So it is brought from a local shrine belonging to the Lakiari, and they go to the place known as Muharram for the 10th of the Muharram. So it is not exhibited to the public, even when they are taking it to Muharram Karbala in Sevan Sharif, because this Gaudry is covered by other textiles, and so you cannot see it. Only the followers of this Sayyid lineage can see the Gaudry. The last but not the least relic is the Kishti. Once again, it is a very symbol of the wandering Sufi, the calendar, and it is also a beautiful artifact. But I'm not art historian, so I will speak only as an anthropologist, and I will speak of it as a relic. So this Kishti, in fact, there are several Kishti, and so they are said to have been Lal Shabazz Kishti, because the calendar was wandering, and he was begging food, especially, and it is said that the food was put in this kishti. The kishti is a very important trope in Persian Sufi poetry. It became a kind of symbol because it is said in Persian poetry that the calendar used to drink some sacred liquor, amrit or bang, I don't know, in this kishti, and this it was putting them closer to God. So this kishti also is interesting because, as you can see, at the two ends there is this kind of monster known as makara, which is a very important also element in Indian, in South Asian art, shared by also with Hindu art and Muslim art, etc. And you can see last fishes also, which are carved on this kishti, because of course during centuries Sevan was on the Indus River. Now there are a few kilometers between, and Sevan was a port, and even the dominant population were the fishermen, the Malla, and the Moana. So this ritual object is also very important in the balance between the different lineage, between the follower of each lineage, but mostly it is kept by the Lakiari Sayyid. And so the Lakiari organize a number of processions linking them with their main follower, to whom they give the kishti for some days. And for example, the master of Bodloba, another shrine, used to keep this kishti for some days, and himself, with this kishti, he performed ritual for initiating followers of Bodlo Bahar. So now I turn to this Baudelaire, and especially it is so said to be the most important follower of Lal Shabazz. And what is very interesting, so you can see now I'm talking maybe about Alexander, is that his full name is Sikandar Baudelaire Bahar's Dargah. And as I said previously, this shrine was built, of course we don't know when, but very close to previous Julelal Varun Dev temple also. Baudelaire Bahar is a very interesting character. Once again, it is saturated with narratives, but is a very special figure if you compare him with all the other many followers of Sewan. I would say that in Sewan there are maybe 20 or 22 shrines which are the shrines of Lal Shabazz followers. So this Baudelaire Bahar is very particular because he is said to have been the closer follower of Lal Shabazz calendar, and there are many other things. Of course, I cannot give all the anecdote about him, but it's very interesting. So his full name is Sikandar Baudelaire Bahar, and in the spiritual genealogy silsila, I could see in the master of Baudelaire Bahar, the Murshid, the Sajjada Nashin of Baudelaire Bahar, I could say that Baudelaire Bahar is said, no, Lal Shabazz is the 14th in the line, and Baudelaire the 15th. Of course, it started with the Holy Prophet Muhammad, then Hazrat Ali, and also other characters which are very intriguing, because usually they are not in the South Asian silsila, this or that. And there is a number of anecdotes, as I say. Only one, it is said that once Lal Shabazz were looking for Baudelaire Bahar, and then he went to a butcher who was cooking piece of meat in his deg, and so when Lal Shabazz called him, the pieces of meat in the degs came, and finally they put together, and it was Baudelaire Bahar. So for me, it's a kind of also of metaphor of a number of things, but okay. Yes, so it is a common representation of, as you can see, Hazrat Sikandar Baudelaire Bahar, and very close to his friend Lal Shabazz. Yes, and so still to try to find a number of links between Alexander Sikandar and Sufism. So we have Baudelaire Bahar and local people in Sevan, especially follower of Sikandar Baudelaire Bahar, used to say that he is Alexander, that this Sikandar Baudelaire Bahar is Alexander, Iskander, but also I would say that what is very interesting for me regarding Alexander Iskander come from his relationship with a very important character in Muslim culture, Khwaja Rezan. Because, as you know, according to Nizami, especially Iskander Nama, there is a narrative where Iskander is with Khwaja Reza, and they are looking for the source of life, meaning eternity, how to be eternal, because it is said that if you find this water, if you drink the water, you will be eternal. So here you can see Sikandar with Khwaja Reza and with a fish. There is also this other representation of Iskandar and Khwaja Reza from a Louvre museum. It's also very beautiful. But if I put this, it is because even Khwaja Reza is a very enigmatic figure. You can find him, Khwaja Reza, from Albania, Morocco to Indonesia, in the whole Muslim world. But it's also very interesting to see that throughout history, different statues were attributed to him. And on this miniature, you can see how he is represented with the flames, with the veil. So sometime in the Middle Age, he was given prophetic statues. But then after many Muslim scholars, starting with Maududi, denied that he was a prophet and that is only a sacred figure. But you can see, you can find this in medieval sources. Yes, so as you can see in this miniature, Alexander with the aureole and the crown is following Khwajarizar, and his army is also behind, and they are looking for the source of eternal life. The representation of Khwajarizar was standardized in South Asia during the Mughal, and this is one of the most common representation of Khwajarizar, old man, bird, with the aureole, which is typical of Mughal art. And also, as you can see, he's standing on a fish, and the fish is itself on a river. So it is a 18th century miniature. But Khwajarizar also, whose worship is usually associated with water, river, so there is the Indus River, there is the sea, of course, very close to Sin, and I would say that there is a kind of vernacularization of the representation of Khwajarizar, and I want, of course, to thank Zulfikar Ali Kaloro, because he was able to find out this representation on the right part, and so you can see Khwajarizar, because it is present a lot, is the story of Soni Mera, and of course Zulfikar will talk about after me. But what is of interest for me, this representation of Khwajarizar, because you can find a lot even in Turkey, in Iran, this and that, Mughal, many, but is not with a fish, is with a crocodile. And so it is the only representation of Khwajarizar I know till now with a crocodile. And also this crocodile will allow me once again to make a kind of link with Julelal as the Hindu god of the Hindus, Varun Dev, because in all representation of Varun Dev is not on a fish, he is on a crocodile. So it's only, of course, a kind of comment. But in any case, this painting is very fascinating. Yeah, a last thing about Sikandar and his relationship with Sufism, or Sikandar Alexander as a Sufi. We can find also a narrative in relation with him. It is about his travel to the sky, because it is attested in a number of sources from the Christian world and from the Muslim world. And of course, when I learned about this, I thought of a tradition attributed to Lal Shabazz calendar, but also which is very common in the Sufi world. It is also said that the Sufi used to travel spiritually, but it's a kind of a travel in the heaven, and it can be said that it is a kind of replica of the Miraj of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. But so in the case of Lal Shabazz especially, you can find in the 17 sources that he did perform a travel in the skies, and it is even named in Persian Quds Parvaz, the sacred flight. So there is a kind of parallel maybe we can do with Alexander. Now I guess it is time to conclude, but it's not a real conclusion. Let me only summarize this presentation in guise of conclusion. Yes, so Sewat Charles is a very rich space, of course, in terms of rituals, and I have to confess that I was not able to find a lot about Sikandar and his relationship with Sufis, not only in Sevan, except that Bodlo Bahar has this name of Sikandar, but I could not find when this Sikandar name started to be used by the Sufi and what is exactly the meaning. So I think that as scholar it's also important to acknowledge that we can be ignorant. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Dr. Bavon. We will dive right into Dr. Zulfiqar Ali Kalhuro's talk, actually. He's an anthropologist, also an author of many books. Whenever I call him, he's always traveling for research, always, and searching for new ideas. The last time, well, actually, the first time I met you, Dr. Kalhoro, was when there was a conference happening, and that was a very eye-opening one. This was 10 years ago, the Karachi conference, in which he brought to light the idea of these Buddhist rock carvings that actually exist in Karachi. So we look forward to you today as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Saima, for a very brief introduction. So first of all, I wanted to thank the organizers of this wonderful conference to give me an opportunity to share my research that I have been doing in Sindh since 1998. So Saima is right. I am always on the move in search of new ideas, research. So I always come up with new research, new ideas. I try to inspire young scholars. So where every time you would see my title is different from the earlier one. So this time, this is also interesting. I hope that this would generate a lot of debate and inspire the young scholars to, carry out further research on the topic that I'm going to share with you. The topic of my presentation, as you can see, is representation of Alexander or Sikandar, as we call in this part of the world, in mural or wall paintings of Sindh. So this is how I go along when I talk. First I will talk about Alexander or Sikandar or in Persian painting, because it's very important to give you an overview of Persian painting, that how these narratives, stories came to Sindh or arrive Sindh with the Persian literature. Then I will discuss some themes that we have in mural paintings of Sindh, followed by how Sindhi painters, particularly the Sindhi folk painters, imagined Sikandar in the wall painting of Sindh, and finally the last word about conclusion. So Sikandar's story and character inspired the Persian poets, writers and painters who wrote his legends and his stories in both verse and prose. So Shahnama is perhaps the first book, the book of Kings by Firdausi, where we find about Sikandar's narrative and stories. And then Sikandar Nama, the book of Alexander, of Nizami, of Ganja, one of his 5 stories of his Khamsa, means 5. So Khamsa is a compilation of literary works by Nizami of Ganja, or as he called Nizami Ganjvi, in the early 13th century. The first is short. Talking about the 5 stories or 5 books that Nizami has written. 3 of the 5 are about the romantic loves, tales and stories. The first is short and didactic. The second, the romantic tale of Khusro Parvez, Sasanian king, and Shiri. The third, the love story of Leila and Majnu. And the fourth is Haft Peker, 7 portraits. The fifth and the last work of Khamsa is Sikandar Nama, the didactic story of Alexander the Great and his exploits in the Islamic world, where he arrived as a king and world conqueror and eventually becomes a sage. Sorry, I have written age, it's actually sage and a prophet. And apart from Shah Nama and Sikandar Nama, we have another literary work, Persian work, that is Darab Nama. It tales about Darab, as we call, also it is known Dara, that was composed in 12th century by Muhammad ibn Hassan Abu Tahir Tarsusi. And then another interesting, very important work to understand Sikandar's travels to, even to China. I mean, we talk about Yajuj and Majuj, so Magog and Gog. It's Sikandar, it's like Alexander's Wall by Navai. That was written in 15th century. It also celebrated Sikandar in their literary works. And then we have some Persian scholars, particularly Persian poet Amir Khusro of Delhi's Ain-e-Sikandari, that also portrays Sikandar as a explorer and scientist compared to Nizami's philosopher king depiction. So this is how you can see some of the paintings from the books, literary books that I have just mentioned. Now let's talk about Sindh. If you look at this map, sorry. You see these red dots. These are the basically various sites where I have worked, and I have found interesting paintings, not of Sikandar but also various other paintings that I just shared with you. So these are the tombs where one can see many folk tales, narratives, legends of the folk heroes, or the local heroes, or the non-local heroes. So when you talk about Sindh's wall paintings, so this is how I have for your understanding classified into various themes. So there are floral and geometric designs, animal motifs, hunt scenes, battle scenes, and representation of dance and music, romance tales, romantic tales, heroes and legends, particularly romance of Sasipunnu are dominant as compared to all other romantic tales in wall paintings of Sindh. And then romance of Leila Chanesar, Soni Mehar, Mumal Rano, Umar Marvi, Sorat Rai Yach, or Bijal Sorat Rai Yach, and Leila Majnu and others, and some paintings or depictions of local and non-local heroes. This is how, if you look at this slide, you can see 3 different folk tales. This is Mumal Rano, Sasipunnu, and each of the basically tales was divided into different episodes. So folk painters basically focus the climax of the story. And you see in this actually panel, you can see Sasi, and the shepherd, she made shepherds in the wilderness when Punnu's brother was taking Punnu back to Kech Makran. And this is the representation of Jam Tamachi. And then this is a closer images of Sasipunnu folktale. I mean, I cannot discuss about the stories of each of folktale because we don't have much time. So rather I would just focus on the part which is basically the focus of today's presentation, Sikandar's representation. So let's move to another slide. And you can see on the left is representation of Bijal Surat Rai Yach. This is an interesting story. Yach was basically known for generosity. He was a generous king. So, as legend has it, that he, went to his palace because two kings were fighting, King Anirai and Yach. So he went to his palace and he was known, he was celebrated sarangi or a fiddle player. So he played sarundo outside his palace. So he was so happy, so glad. Yach was so glad, then he asked the bard what he demanded. He asked for his head. Then he cut his head with dagger and presented severed head as a memento to the bard Bijal. This is the figure of the Bijal, and you see this is a representation of women then mourning over the death of the Yach. And on the left is a very crude representation of Soni Mehar, or as it is called in Punjabi, Soni Mahiwal. So they are always shown sitting on cot surrounded by buffaloes. And two other important stories, Omar Marvi and Nuri Jamtamachi. People know and they have read a lot about these stories. So apart from these local folk stories, we also find some foreign stories or non-local stories. And this is Laila Majnu's painting in one of the tombs at Tilasha necropolis in Sangad. So in the beginning I said that many stories or narratives reached Sindh through Persian literature. And the folk painters picked up the most important themes. I shared few, particularly romantic tales, be it Sasipono or Soni Mahewal's tales, but some mysterious creature were also depicted on the walls of the painting. In this slide you can see, this is very interesting representation. See two jackal-headed or maybe Inubis are shown fighting in the tomb of Mir Alayar Khan Talpur at Drigbala, and you can see another representation in the same tomb. Why such paintings were depicted? There are many interesting debates and stories, and even you can see similar representation in Persian paintings. I mean, you can see the winged creatures, see animal headed and men, fighting with the animals. So the debate is very long, so let's come to another Persian character that reached to Sindh through Persian literature is that of Rostam. So these stories actually I learned from the family of the painters. As an anthropologist, I also interviewed people, some village intellectuals, oral historians. I learned from them. My first understanding of some of the images were different actually. For instance, when I first visited the graveyard of Dauja Koba, or the graveyard of Daud Chandio near Gebidero in Kambar Court, when I saw the painting of Soni Mehar, I couldn't understand. The local people told me, oh, this is the story of Soni Mehar. I asked, how did you know that? Said, my grandfather commissioned these tombs, and we know the family who painted these tombs. I made some. And believe me, and I'm thankful to them, because you see, as anthropologists, we collected information. We asked questions from respondents. And now I have been using the term, instead of respondent, I call them village intellectuals. From them we learn actually. So because of their knowledge, I'm discussing everything that I learned from the village intellectuals, whom we call respondents. So according to the local tradition in the family of painters, they told, have you ever heard about Rustam? I said yes. When I was a child, I was told they were Rustam Palwan, not to be confused with the Rustam Palwan Baloch. So Rustam from Iran, he was known for, you know, his lone knight figure of Shah Nama, who performs a number of heroic story. He was a strong man. So just imagine how Sindhi folk painter displayed his bravery. You see, sometimes Rustam is shown in chains and tethered to the pegs, then he will break the chains. This is how that will reflect his bravery. And in this painting, you can see he's controlling two powerful animals, an elephant and perhaps a lion or a tiger. Though it is a very, you know, it's not a refined representation, but this is all that comes from the imagination of a folk painter. And when I was basically, writing on mural paintings, I came across recently one of the interesting article that was written by Sunil Sharma. And he also discussed the same thing, basically, which I am discussing now. According to him, the most striking in various works written for different audiences is the increasingly imaginative journeys and travels of Sikandar's travels, especially with respect to his relationship with women he encounters in each place. So he believes wherever he went, or which area he conquered, he encountered with women. This is all imaginative. So even we have been discussing for 2 days whether Sikandar came here or not. And Dr. Nilofer Sheikh was right and is right, because I also traveled. I've traveled every nook and corner of Sindh. I did not find anything as far as material culture is concerned apart from the paintings. We did not any shared, nothing archaeological, no archaeological evidence has been found so far as my knowledge is concerned. So, but this tale or these narratives or stories are preserved in folklore and oral traditions. It is not important that folk painters had access to the manuscripts. They heard the stories, and on basis of the what they heard, they painted, they imagined, oh, this is how Sikandar looked like, this is how the story of Sasi Punnu might be. I mean, he never ever saw a manuscript or book where such paintings were shown, but that all come from his imagination. So for Sindhi folk painters, two things were important. He painted Sikandar as a warrior and a lover. So I will only show a few images. I mean, this is like one of very interesting representation of Sikandar with Kani Fo, which is from Amir Khosrow's late 19th century illustration that was copied later on. And lot of interesting scenes, battle between Sikandar and Dara or Darius. So this particular image, as told by the locals, or according to the local traditions, are duel between Sikandar and Dara. For folk painters, Sindhi painters, Sikandar was not great. Dara was also great. So both are shown fighting. And this is not in just one tomb. We can find these depictions wherever you go in Kambar Shadat Court or in Dadu. But my earlier understanding about this particular dual fight scene was, I believed that since these representation were in the tombs of some Baloch tribes, I believe there is a battle between Rind and Lashar. So they might be, Gohram and Chakar fighting. But local people say, no, look, this is Sikandar and this is Dara. So maybe either they are Sikandar, a representation of Sikandar or Dara, or Gohram or Chakar. And I have written the book, Wall Paintings of Sindh, where I have discussed these are basically the representation of Chakar and Gohram. But I later on rediscovered and learned from the painters, no, this is from Dara and Sikandar's representation. And same dual in every tomb, some of other tombs. And apart from this, we see a very crude representation of Sikandar finally defeating Dara. And you see, this is how people defines Sikandar kills Dara, and her wife comforts her. And this is another representation. So, as I said that we have also very refined miniature paintings. One of the earliest known manuscript was written by Waris, and that is on Saif al-Maluk wa Badi al-Jamal. That was written in 1775, perhaps for one of the local elites of Chhatta or for Mian Sarfraz Khan Kalhodo. So there are also some interesting miniature paintings that was produced by Kalhodas and also for Talpurs. But as far as these paintings in tombs are concerned, they are not as refined as miniatures are, because those miniatures were produced under the royal patronage. But now, if you see at these paintings on the wall of the tombs, they were basically commissioned by the local elites, and painters decided what they will paint. So this is a new perspective that I shared, and thank you very much for your patience.
I have some disappointing news for you. Apologies on behalf of Dr. Annabelle Colonet. She will not be able to present today due to unavoidable circumstances. However, she has sent her presentation, and we will be running it for you. We, of course, neither myself, and in fact, I'm going to be asking Dr. Michelle to support me here. So if you could just join me, Michelle. We will be taking 10 minutes, and you're welcome to read through the slides. There are texts. We will not try to go beyond the extent of our own knowledge, actually. So thanks. Millennium of History, Ceramic Wares from Sehwan. And I'll just read the subtitle out for you. The ceramic wares and productions that came to light during the excavations of the Sehwan fort and their relationship to other ceramic material discovered in Sindh. This is circa 8th and 18th centuries CE.
Yes, thank you very much, Saim. No, just I want to say first that, yeah, Annabelle, she did her PhD with Monique Kervran. So already I mentioned her name because she started the excavation on the Alexander Fort in Serad Sharif in 1989. So Annabelle was her student, and so she also participated in several field work with the French archaeological team. And so this is, yeah, the result, because with them they had a topographer. As you can see, this map comes from this topographer, R. Saupin. So it is a representation of the different places on the Kila that this archaeologist excavated. And so basically it is the Kila. You can see the light? Because I don't. But I should be okay. Yes, you can see the main entrance in the south on the Kila, and so the different places on the Kila that was explored by Annabelle with other archaeologists. And I suppose, because I was not there, but I suppose that mainly all the ceramics they found comes from these excavation places.
It's okay. Let them read it.
Yeah, so they call it ravine. I didn't remember this place where they excavate, and so they gave them name. I don't know how and why. So this comes from Asma ravine, and in fact it is a kind of summary of the different strata they were able to reach.
I'm going ahead.
Yes, with broad periods. And this is also related to the ceramic ware that they found probably in the same ravine. And yeah, because you know the ceramics which are exhibited in the lobby come from this excavation. The Arab period, yeah, so you have some chronological from apparently from early 8th century, yeah, and to the end of the 10th century, yeah, so it was when Sindh was ruled by the Arab after Muhammad bin Qasim came to Sindh in 712, and so a kind of emirates was created in Sindh, and up to the 10th century. Now you can see the coins. They were discovered from the 8th century to 10th century, and discovered it's this phase 4 layers in Asma ravine. Shirts. I can only read, you know.
We can just leave it on for some people who might be experts in this. Dr. Neelafar?
The later period ceramics. She has not given the earlier ones. So she is comparing them with the Muslim period ceramics of other sites.
Thank you so much. We might be picking your brain when the conversation, the Q&A happens. Thanks.
Okay. And these are some of the molded wares you could see outside in the lobby also. These are the molded wares. These are a bit earlier. But here she has shown it in phase 4, which I might not agree with her. But she has shown it in phase, and this is the stratigraphy that they had cleared while they were excavating at Sevan.
Dr. Nilofer, I think it's time for you to just hold on to that mic.
So these are the molded wares and the stamped pottery, which we find also in Mansoura and Bambor and other many sites in Sindh. All over Sindh we have these stamped and molded ware. Up to Multan, we have this molded ware with the sort of sun symbol. Back. And we have the painted wares. You can see this painted ware outside. The similar painted wares have been found from Mansoura as well as from the site of Bambor, which have been depicted placed outside in the lobby. All these wares, you can see them, the molded ones, the painted ones, you can see them. And here she has given them in later periods. But they were found a little earlier in Bambor and in Mansoura.
Really, I think she should just keep holding on to the mic because we definitely don't know enough. I think it's best for you to read through the slide. I'm talking to the audience, please.
I wish she was here. There were so many questions that I wanted even to ask her.
Apologies.
So we have the grey and the black wares. These grey and black wares are the earlier ones. And this black and grey wares are the earlier ones that have been found in other sites all over Sindh. And the painted wares are the later ones. This is Islamic. You can see the script over there. The 11th to 13th century. This is later period in Sevar. But she has not given anything of the earlier period that they found in the lower levels in various ravines that they cleared at Sevar.
Thank you.
The sad part is that this excavation from 1996, they excavated from 1996 to 2002. We only have a short 30-40 page preliminary report that was submitted to the culture department. At that time, we had the federal department, but they had one copy was with Hamid Ahund, which we were able to get it. Otherwise, excavation is destruction if you don't properly record things from it, artifacts from it. Here, since 2002, we don't have a single detailed report of the excavation so that we can compare this stratigraphy with other sites of Sindh that are being excavated or which have been excavated. So this is the sad part. Perhaps if they have published in French, we need to have a copy of that so that can be translated. I'm not sure if Bhavan might be knowing it, but we need to have a detailed report of the excavation that was conducted by Dr. Munich in 1996-2002.
Appreciate it. I think we'll certainly be looking into that.
We should have, because otherwise it's all destruction, whatever happened at that time. Excavation is a destruction of site if not recorded properly.
Understood. Thank you so much. Right, thanks very much. Thank you, Michelle. And, and thanks so very much, Dr.
Thank you, Nilofer.
Exactly. So the final presentation that we have today is by Hiba Hashmi and Amir Bazal Khan. They are both co-founders of MAHI, which is the acronym for Maritime Archaeology and Heritage Institute. That's a really beautiful acronym. The usual translation, there are several translations for MAHI, but the one that strikes is the beloved. That's Hiba for you. And Amir Bazal Khan. We'll need support because we'll be switching slides now. Tech support, please. Thanks.
Is that not working? No, it's just. Oh. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much, Saima, for that lovely introduction. Yeah. Just while we're waiting, I'll introduce myself. My name is Hiba Hashmi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Maritime Archaeology and Heritage Institute, and I will be presenting today with my colleague and co-founder, Amir Bazal Khan. We will be splitting the presentation in two halves. I will do the first half and Amir will do the second. This is a bit of a tonal shift from the rest of the presentations, wonderful presentations that we've seen over the last 3 days. While those presentations have explored the history of Alexander and the context in which he was making his way down the Indus, we will now be talking about preserving and presenting his material legacy for future generations, and more specifically archaeology in virtual reality. And we have used the Savin Fort, in relevance to the conference, we've used the Savin Fort as a case study for rapid recording, digital preservation, and virtual tourism. I will just really quickly introduce MAHI. We are a non-profit autonomous research organization dedicated to the investigation and preservation of maritime cultural heritage in Pakistan and in the Western Indian Ocean. MAHI's flagship project is the Inventory of Maritime Archaeology in Pakistan, which has been carried out so far over 2 phases. The first phase, very generously supported by EFT, was a desk-based archaeological potential assessment and was basically collecting data on the types of sites, the types of evidence that we may encounter in the field, and also building a historical chronology for the maritime history of the Western Indian Ocean. Then we have phase 2, which we are currently in, which is more focused on fieldwork and ground truthing, and it's being supported by the Arcadia Fund. In terms of our methodology, we operate in sort of three distinct phases. The first phase of our research is desk-based, where we look at legacy data in terms of archaeological reports, historical documents, etc. And we study maps and aerial imagery. And we we use a lot of GIS to georeference the aerial imagery, to reference the historic maps, and we extract data from that. Then there's fieldwork, where we ground truth a lot of the anomalies found on aerial imagery. And then because we are focused on maritime archaeology and we work in the underwater environment, we do geophysical surveys and diver-based surveys. And then finally, heritage isn't complete without intangible heritage, so we do some community interviews and surveys as well. Today's talk is going to focus on one, so in our fieldwork, one of the methods we use is photogrammetry. And that is what this presentation will be focused on. Photogrammetry is the process by which so it's extracting 3D models from 2D images. And the software uses different camera perspectives, and it combines photos into a 3D model. We use photogrammetry underwater for shipwreck sites, for submerged fortifications and infrastructure, and we use photogrammetry on land for coastal sites or sites that are that have a maritime function. There are a few reasons why we use the tool of photogrammetry in archaeology, and these can be divided into three main sections. Firstly, we use it for archaeological research, so high-level archaeological research. Then we use it for heritage management or site management, and then finally for tourism. There are certain advantages to using this tool. The first is that it's rapid. It's as fast as your data capture. So however long it'll take you to capture data in the field and take photographs, thousands of photographs, yes, but it's basically that's the core of the activity, data capture. Also, while it looks like a very complex process, it's not very reliant on specific technology. So all you really need is a camera and a good computer, and the software, which is freely available. The next advantage to us when we use photogrammetry is accuracy. For archaeology, we require very, very specific, high-level, high-resolution data, and the photogrammetry software prepares a 3D mesh of the environment or the object that you are capturing. It also prepares digital elevation models, which, and this is a digital elevation model of the Savin Fort. Some of you will recognize the site. And this gives us very valuable information about the topography of a site. Then we have, as I mentioned, if your images are very high resolution, your photogrammetry model will also be very high in resolution. And to the degree that you can take, and it's because it's scaled, you can actually measure each brick, each tiny component of a site using the software. So often to sub-millimeter accuracy, by the way. This is as accurate as the data capture tools, so your GPSs and your cameras, but the model will not be introducing any of its own inaccuracies. Then another advantage is complete visualization of a site. So especially for large-scale sites, sometimes it's hard to get, when you're on the ground, it's hard to get a full extent of the site. And as you can see here, we can see the Savin Fort from different perspectives, and we can grasp a good idea of a large site. Also, this is very useful in underwater environments where visibility is often very low, and you have to go right up to a shipwreck or a site to be able to see just a part of it, so you lose sight of what the entire site looks like. Then another advantage is that you're recording in perpetuity. You are capturing this data, and archival high-resolution data for perpetuity. We all know that heritage is at risk of natural disasters, of human development, of iconoclasm, and to be able to capture this data and store it on online repositories or in your own database is basically capturing history for future generations. Then finally, the advantage is of site monitoring, or in heritage management, to monitor a site through time. So you can use legacy data, so old photographs, old aerial imagery, to create models of an older version of your site and then get the present day version, and then with constant regular recording, you can track changes in your site. So if your site is vulnerable to coastal erosion, you will be able to see exactly where the damage is hitting, how it's hitting, and how often it's hitting. And if your site is prone to looting, as this example illustrates, that they've layered 2 photogrammetry models together and they can identify which of the amphora have been stolen or have gone missing. And while there is material loss, yes, because they've lost the amphora, you still have a digital record of it for the rest of time. The case study that we want to introduce now that's relevant to this conference is we wanted to explore the idea of digital tourism using our photogrammetry models and pushing it into the Unreal Engine, which I will explain in just 1 minute. So when we went to Savin, we were there for 2.5 days. We did data capture for two and a half days. We made a plan. We used a drone. So we took aerial shots. We took shots from the ground for more high-resolution textures. And then when we came back to Karachi, we built, over several days, built the models and various sections of the models in the software. The next part of it was pushing the high-resolution model into what's known as the Unreal Engine. Now, the Unreal Engine is a video game development tool from the game and software development company Epic Games. With this tool, developers have the ability to build a simulation, edit videos, and render animations. Now, while our high-resolution photogrammetry model was a challenge to push that into an interactive environment. So the model had to be scaled, and it had to be the resolution had to be lowered for it to be fully functional. Now, I will actually let the video or the demonstration talk for itself, and then I will hand over to my colleague Amir, who will talk us through the advantages of using this in digital tourism. So can we have the video playing, please?
Thanks, Hiba. Let's see if I can find a way to get it started. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is Savin, and you're looking at a Google Earth sort of zoom down to the city. And we're coming in on the fort. And this is sort of the best you can see on Google Earth. You sort of get this very flat image of the fort. And so this is what we ended up with after 2 days of work. And so this is a three-dimensional, I mean, the contrast is fairly striking. I mean, this is a three-dimensional representation. It's accurate, sort of sub-centimeter accuracy. It's quite spectacular what software can do these days. And so really taking it from a very accurate archaeological archive recording data set, we're now looking at making this interactive. And now we've transitioned into the Unreal Engine. And this is where you can walk around the site. You have this avatar that's effectively allowing you to sort of this representation of a person walking through. You can read signage, which is not actually on site. This is digital. These are digital interpretive assets that have been inserted into the environment, and it's multimedia. You can have videos playing.
या उसने बनाया है या इससे पहले भी था, लेकिन उसने इसको परिवर्तन किया और उसको बनाया है। हमारे मुकामी लोगों का और मेरा।
So you've got a very rich set of textures as you're walking or moving through the site. There is a VR headset outside for you to try this on your own. And there's another video. It's a very short-sighted avatar there. Can't quite see the sign very well. I think that's probably the video. That's all we'll need. Okay, great. Hi everybody, my name's Amir Bazal Khan, and thank you for that introduction. So really what we're talking about now is taking these 3D models, which are extremely accurate for archaeological archiving. So this is effectively a data set that will now hopefully be accessible to researchers 10 years, 20, 50 years from now, to be able to see what the fort looked like in 2023. Any subsequent monitoring, as Hiba mentioned, would again just add to that data set. So when we take this from an archaeological data set to make it accessible to the public, we did have to scale it down, as you saw there, and as you'll see outside in the lobby in the VR headset. But it's effectively becoming more accessible. It's easier for the limited computational power we have in 2023 to process this quickly. But 10 years from now, that may well change. So what do digital heritage trails do? And in fact, let's first define what a digital heritage trail is. And it's basically a curated route through a landscape or a site that allows visitors to digitally travel between these sites and these locations within a virtual environment. And so why would you want to do this? So public access to archaeological sites in Sindh, which are invariably in remote areas, can be difficult to reach for not just Sindhis, but especially for foreign nationals. Traveling around a remote area can be challenging. Some of these sites are actually on private property, or they're in sensitive areas where it's not easy for people to reach. And so having a digital representation allows for access. I mean, if we had Greek school children that wanted to see Sevan, or understand possibly the story of Alexander, they could actually visit some of these remote locations around the world, including here in Sindh. Of course, there are sort of fundamental issues around access to some of these places which can be challenging for people with disabilities, and so a digital experience can help overcome some of those limitations. As Hiba mentioned, our sort of core work is really with underwater sites, and in cases like this, there are more non-divers than divers, so making sites accessible to a non-diving public is something that photogrammetry is very effective at, and the speed with which this can be done and the accuracy with which this can be done underwater makes this an essential tool for us. Of course, sites also don't last forever. I think if 2022 has taught us anything, it is that our heritage is vulnerable, and it's essential that we record it in the most accurate ways possible, something that is going to allow us to access and understand this data going into the future, especially when sites are lost. But also when it comes to damage and the reconstruction and rebuilding of sites, these sorts of data sets can be extremely valuable. So what we get with sites like VR experiences or these sorts of digitized sites is very immersive experiences. You can, but you can also have an experience that is in fact greater than what you would otherwise experience. So your perspective can be one of a human, as you would if you were walking through this through a site like Sevan, but you can also change that perspective. You can have a bird's eye view of places, you can have a fish eye view of shipwrecks. So the ability to change perspective is quite interesting, and in certain sites can actually be, from an interpretation perspective, be really useful. And these aren't sort of fixed, sort of a fixed sequence of experiences. These are open environments. These lend themselves to exploration, to a non-linear experience where you can choose how you want to go about it, spend time where you want. You're not chasing after a tour guide who's 20 meters ahead of you and you can't hear them properly, and this is something that happens at your own pace. And the special effects can help modify your experience. You can actually go to certain places at night, you can change the lighting, you can add all kinds of special effects. So you can actually curate the experience to a very high level of detail. You can add points of interest, certain elements of interactivity where you can get further information, where you can drill down into looking at particular artifacts. So you're able to make that selection as the viewer. The digital signage and heritage interpretation that's developed, like again in this example, is not on site. This is really in the digital realm only, these signs are. I'll talk about these in the next slide. We only have 2 or 3 slides to go, but the content that is served up on these signs can be catered to the demographic of the viewer. So if you've got different levels of expertise, if you're a child and you want to see certain types of information to engage with, or an expert might want different levels of information, you can change the language on signs. Effectively, this can track the demographic of the user and provide the information accordingly. And as you saw, you can have more than just static text and images. So you can actually have multimedia, video, audio, and so you have a whole range of much more richer experiences than you can have through a static sign on site. Now, digital and augmented reality, so virtual realities and augmented realities is another sort of extension of this idea, and that's what we're demoing outside if you get a chance to have a look at it. And it basically takes all our intuitions around space and perspective, and it sort of feeds it to you in these goggles. So it really ramps up that immersion factor that we were talking about. And augmented reality, similarly. Now, this is something that we would like to implement, where you actually go to Saven, and the same signs that you can see in the VR headset, you could actually use your phone to look around the site as you're there and see the same signs. And so the advantage of this is that these are easier to maintain. You can update these digitally, and you don't actually have these signs rusting out in the landscape. They're just digitally maintained. And of course, you can track how many people have come to your site and where they're going, or what they find interesting. So that was a bit of just a rapid run through of digital tourism and the potential for these sorts of initiatives at heritage places and heritage sites in Sindh. Of course, it's a lot of work to put these together, so you really do need collaborators. And I just want to acknowledge the contribution and assistance of the CDC and the Endowment Fund Trust, some very, very talented technical folks at the CDC, and of course Reality Forge, that really took our archaeological data model and put it into this gaming engine that allowed for this interactivity. And I think if you've got any questions, if you'd like to speak to either Hiba, myself, or the rest of our team, we'll be here before you head off to Saven. Thank you very much.
Michelle, Dr. Kalhoro, Hiba, would you please come on stage? We'll have a very brief question and answer session, please. Thanks Thanks very, very much. Exceptionally insightful, and we're very grateful to have you here, obviously, and very diverse, actually. That's the beauty of this panel. I think we should first look to our audience for questions, please. Yes. The mic for Dr. Stoneman, please.
Thank you. Is it on? Yes. Okay. If I may, I'm going to ask two questions. One of them is simply a point of information for Dr. Kolhoro. I really was excited by the images you showed of the wall paintings depicting Alexander and Dara and so on and so on. I don't believe you gave us any hint of a date of these artifacts, and I wondered if you could give us a rough chronological indication of when these paintings were made.
I'm sorry, it wasn't very clear on the microphone. If you could be a little closer to the microphone, that would help.
Okay, it's on. I just wanted to know the date of the approximate date of the wall paintings you showed us of Alexander and Dara and so on.
I think these paintings that I showed were mostly from 19th and 20th century.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to...
They're not very old, actually.
Yeah. My second question was from Michelle, because I was extremely interested in what you said at the very end of your paper about the spiritual flight of the Sufi and the... it's, as an analogy, the aerial flight of Alexander and the Miraj of the Prophet Muhammad. It made me think immediately also of in the Persian tradition of the flight of Kaikavus, which of course is the epitome of a bad act, somebody doing a bad thing. And I wonder if this analogy is also deployed in the context of Sufi transgressive behavior. Can you say anything on that?
Thank you very much. According to my knowledge, I could not find direct reference between Sufi in South Asia and Kaikosro in relation with this flight. But I would say that this topic is a kind of very common topic in many religious traditions. Of course, in the Muslim concept, as I say, it is usually referred to the marriage of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. But I'm sure that in some literature, maybe South Asian literature from 18th, 17th century, I'm sure that it could be possible to find also a reference to Kaikosro. And but according to my personal knowledge, I could not find a direct mention, I would say.
Thank you, Amal. Ms. Nilofar Farooq, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is for Dr. Kolhoro. Thank you for those fascinating images. They really are quite intricate. There's a certain stylization which we normally see in folk paintings. Have you done any research on the pigments that have been used? Because the palette is quite varied, but the later ones that are brighter seem to be quite... So I just wanted to ask about the palette, and then also you made a remark regarding the artists could do what they liked. I mean, it was their discretion to depict a love story or maybe a battle scene. So normally in the case of such work, they're commissioned to do a certain thing or connected to the likes and dislikes of the deceased. So, I wanted to know about that. How did you come to the conclusion that it was the discretion of the artist?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for asking a very interesting question. Yes, pigments are varied actually. So there are many that you also noticed in the images. So right from, mostly the black and blue and some even, yellow were added. So it also indicates basically the period or time when these were basically produced. And the second question, whether like, dislike of the painters, I discussed actually in the beginning that what were available to the folk painters, they picked from those actually the stories that they heard. And majority of the folk painters did not have access to the books or the manuscripts where these images were, so they painted or depicted what basically were in their oral tradition or in folklore. So this, all the stories basically came from the folklore that were prevalent in the region where these paintings were produced.
Anyone else, please? Thank you.
The question was the fort. Any idea how old it is? Does it go back in time to what period? Or does it only start quite recently from the Umayyad period, from your excavations?
And would you be kind enough to share your name, please?
Well, the fort, Seven Fort, that's what the
for your
excavations
name.
were for. Sorry?
Could you introduce yourself as well?
My name?
Yes, please.
Salim Bukhari.
Thank you.
I am an urban planner.
Oh.
Others might be better placed to answer this question, but I know for a fact that from the excavations, from Monique Kevran's excavations that began in '96 and ran till about 2000, the first phase of occupation that was identified in the stratigraphy was around the 4th century BC, which is why they associate it with the time of Alexander's journey down the Indus. But the superstructure of the fort, that is most likely a Kalhoro construction. But this is not confirmed.
No, this is your question.
Any further questions from the audience, please? Dr. Nilofar, can we give the mic to Dr. Would you like to respond to this, please?
This the first evidence that, as you said, it's 1st century BC, but they couldn't go deeper because of the water level. But however, this has been rebuilt a number of times. What was the earlier period for the fort is not yet clear in that sense that when it was first constructed, unless a proper stratigraphic archaeological excavation is conducted in some of the parts of the fort where we have a clear stratigraphy, when we have an earlier period showing along with the artifactual material so that it is easily comparable with the material, so that we can date it on relative basis and we can have the radiocarbon dates for it.
Many thanks. Masuma, please.
Thank you. Thank you for a fascinating conference, 2 days completely packed with very exciting information on Alexander and so many things that we learned. I have a couple of questions. One is that I have for members of MAHI. is that the digital representation that you show when the person is entering, this kind of tallish structure, I don't remember seeing that on the side. So I was wondering if it's something that you have managed to learn about at the side. The structure when this person is entering and there are these.
Are you talking about the tall tower?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's quite an active site, and while we were there for the 2 days, this is part of the restorative work that has been developed. I don't know when the last time you went was, but it is a new construction. So that's not a digital insert at all, just the signage. Everything else is actually what's there. If you're going to the Seven excursion, that is the entrance to the fort now that you'll see. Yeah.
Okay. I suppose I have a comment in the sense that relating to a very basic research that we kind of started doing around the Mohanas of Manchar Lake. And for me, I think the question is, or the curiosity is about the link between Alexander and the Mohanas, and some of them are still there. So I don't know if there is any evidence of this connection, because Alexander actually did go all the way down the Indus, and the talk on Nearchus yesterday as well was talking about that connection. So I was wondering if you know anything about it, or if you would like to comment on any possible linkages or evidences that have been discovered. Thank you.
This is actually it's something we've been talking about ourselves. This is sort of separate to what we've prepared for this conference in a sense. But this is one of the oldest communities living on the lake, and have been for countless generations. So we're trying to assess and determine when we can go and actually have a look at some of the areas that they're currently occupying on the lake, and to really look at possibly a remote sensing or a submerged diver survey. The lake is quite a challenging environment for anyone to go into, and so that's something we're looking at from an investigation point of view. I don't know, Hiba, if you wanted to add anything about, I guess that linkage, or.
I think the link isn't something that's been formally studied, but given Seven's association with Sindomana and its various sort of toponyms that feature in the Greek stories, it's impossible for a community as old as the Mohanas to not have interacted, or for Alexander's armies to not have interacted with them if they're that old. These are all tenuous links though, and they're all kind of extrapolated from studies that have been done. But as Amir said, it's something we're really interested in pursuing, so we can update you on it in a few years, hopefully.
I think we've run out of time. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been wonderful, and we will now be going towards the summation of the closing remarks. Please, thanks. Amida Funsa.
Thank you, everybody. What is a summation? And where does one begin to thank, or where does one start? If this conference can motivate our educational institutions and our researchers to probe into Alexander's time here in Sindh, I think it will be a major success. And if we can, a few years from now, organize another Alexander conference where we have more detail about Sevan and about Alexander and about the people, whether these Mohanas were there or not, Wherever there's water, there are mohanas. And we know about the jats and the maids. So that's very clear. It's been a very pleasant experience to have our guests join us for this conference, and to our distinguished guests who've joined this as audience to this wonderful conference. I think the credit for the success, apart from the scholars who've joined us, goes to my colleagues who work day and night. I just happen to be here because I work in the Endowment Fund Trust as its secretary, but boys like Aziz, Shahid, others, many others have put in their bit to make this a success. And with that, I can only thank you, thank everybody who's made this a very pleasant experience. You heard, we've heard eminent scholars from all over the world speak on Alexander, and last night we heard outstanding Abda Parveen, who sang after 3 years of public performance. She's been ailing and unwell, but last night she was very good. So winding up this, before we leave for Seman, I would request our scholars to please join us here for a group photo, if you don't mind. And thank you very much. Baba, Aziz, ke vehiran ke bithagan, ke bithagan, huh? चलो ठीक है, सही है। अमल भी अच्छे हाँ हाँ अच्छा Amir hello. Who be it na? Amir. Hiba. ये क्या जा रही है? Hey, where are you going?
I was just going out 2 minutes. I joined. I haven't
अमर आप क्यों आ जाएं? You have? तांबी अच्छो? आ जाएं? Fatima. Staff आ जाए, staff आ जाए सारा staff आ जाए, चलो आ जाओ, आ जाओ, आ जाओ, आ जाओ, आ जाओ, ऐसे ऐसे, पीछे आ जाए, आ जाए, आ जाए, अमन आ जाए, आ जाए, all the staff, आ जाओ, आ जाओ. Thank you for joining.